far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie Clark Walker, and I am your moderator for today. Well, while I spent the last 2+ decades as a leader in the labor movement, and most of you know me as that, I worked for some time with Harambee Centers, which was a culturally specific center that focused on issues facing individuals and families from Africa and the Caribbean, much of which involved dealing with human rights, anti-racism, gender justice, and empowerment. Empowerment within the education system, immigration, and the criminal justice system, something that I also took with me and worked on as a leader in the Canadian and international labor movement. It's great to see everyone on this beautiful Sunday. And today's topic, I know, is one that has touched many in our community. Whether you have read reports that were written back in the 1990s or the 2000s, and as late as this year, The stats continuously show that Black people, inclusive of our Black youth, are overrepresented in this country's criminal justice system, both as victims and those who are accused and convicted of crime. Because of this fact, our communities are less confident in the system and are always trying to find ways to make the necessary changes to society and its systems to ensure that our young people are in a better position to be productive members of society. Sadly, we still find high rates of Black youth in the system, some who have been criminalized in order to get the mental health supports necessary for them to live. Today's panelists are phenomenal women who have worked with Black youth who may come in contact with or have come in contact with the system. They will give some background information on how they became involved and give us some strategies, including preventative measures to help decrease the overrepresentation of Black youth in the criminal justice system here in Canada. There were supposed to be 3 panelists today. However, one of our sisters is under the weather, so please keep her in your thoughts and send her lots of strength so that she can heal. So in spite of that, I know that we're going to have a great conversation today because we're joined by 2 phenomenal panelists. Today we have with us Norma Faye Nicholson and Angela Simmons. Norma Faye Nicholson is a dynamic and well-respected healthcare professional who is a 5-time self-published author, a public speaker, educator, and mentor. Her books tell us many stories associated with her experience and those of young people who have shared their stories and changed their lives in the hope that it will help others. She enjoys sharing her skills and knowledge in preventative educational forums. As one of the 100 ABC Women 2018 honorees, her goal is to heighten the awareness of Black and minority health and how this is impacted by the justice system. Also with us today, we have Angela Simmons. Angela is an African Nova Scotian from Cherrybrook who currently resides in North Preston. Angela is a lawyer, consultant, former member and deputy speaker of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly, a small business owner, and a community mobilizer whose 20-plus year career extends over the various fields of socioeconomic development, education, entrepreneurship, policy, and cultural competency. Her work and expertise on the historical injustice and systemic discrimination with the Land Titles Clarification Act has received national attention and support from the United Nations Working Group. She has served as the Executive Director of the Land Titles Initiative in the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism. Angela is also the founder and CEO of the A-Team Coaching, and continues to work to address issues that impact structural and systemic inequities on the most vulnerable in our society today. She's also a proud mom of 3 and a nanny to her 2 grandsons. Both of these women will use their lived experiences in their work they do to assist in changing the lives of many. I want to also remind our audience that you can put your questions in the chat or Q&A. Welcome all to our 100 ABC Women Fireside Chat. We also would like to remind everyone that your questions and comments need to remain respectful. We enjoy doing this and we don't want to be put off YouTube or Facebook or the air. So please try to remember to be respectful. I have no issues in taking somebody out, taking them off the chat if they are not respectful. And just remember, this is being live streamed. So welcome all, welcome all. We have lots and lots to cover today. So I'm just going to get into the discussion. So my first question is to both of you. I want to know what made you decide to take on the issue of youth criminal justice. And we'll start with Norma.
Hello, and thank you for having me here today. I decided to take on this issue from just reading the paper, just talking with individuals. And one day I sat in front of the computer, logged into Google, and there was a job available for a healthcare leader to develop a model of healthcare for incarcerated young people in Ontario. And I thought, I could do that. So I applied for the position and I built a team, collaborated with many folks, worked in the community, visited mental health institutions, all the things, the groundwork one has to do to develop a specific, qualified, measurable program. So brought me to work at the largest youth custody facility in Ontario as the healthcare leader. And there I had the opportunity to see what really happens, what I read in the paper. Many Black youth are incarcerated. But something I really hope the folks take away today is that there are Caucasian children that are incarcerated, but they do not spend the length of time incarcerated as the Black youth. And if anyone wants to ask about that, I'll be happy to discuss that later. But one of the things I really want to get across is that should you visit, some people call it a jail, some people call it custody. Should you visit a jail or a custody facility where young people are incarcerated from age 12 to 17, 12 and 13-year-olds are just learning how to track their time or whatever. Should you visit those children, I call them, not one, you will not find even one that is healthy, both physically and mentally, psychologically, and emotionally. Those are not the children that are in the community, they are incarcerated. So when on a broad scale, we talk about Black children being bad and rude and disrespectful, there is an underlying cause as to why we're seeing that behavior. And having worked in youth custody and mental health for over 7 years, I can share many reasons and interventions that we can do as a society, parents, neighbors, to keep our children out of the youth justice.
And we will definitely get to that today, Norma. Definitely get to that. We want to ensure that everybody online that's watching has some of those preventative strategies, because we all come in contact with youth who need that assistance. Yes. So thank you, and we will come back to you. Angela, yes. Tell us why this is so important to you.
Well, thanks, Marie, for the great introduction. I think I could listen to Norma for the whole hour. Really, we could just have one panelist. So I'm looking forward to learning from you as well, and getting your expertise. And so for me, I became interested. I'd say, first, the thing that guides me the most is my children, and having 3 Black children, and a husband who works in Halifax policing, and being in Scotia, we know that there are several reports that have Black and brown people being racially profiled here, and so many other places as well. But for me, my interest came mostly when I started working at the school board as an African Nova Scotian student support worker many years ago. And there were so many children on individual program planning, children being suspended at a higher rate with Black and brown children. And I worked specifically in the community of North Preston at Nelson Winder and Ross Road. And there just happened to be a class that was specialized for 5 Black youth who deemed as out of control and not being able to be sitting in regular classrooms. found that extremely problematic. And really, at a mature age, I won't tell you what that age was, but at a mature age, after working in the school system, decided to apply for law school. And my goal there was to sue the Halifax Regional School Board. Although that didn't happen yet, because I ended up, running for the same government, I'll say, and realized there was a bigger job than just providing a class action. But that is really where my vision and inspiration kind of came from, is to be able to use the law to help navigate and change systems and policies. And having teenage children, articling in my first year working in youth court as a defense, really touched home for me, and really sent a message of what we really need to do collectively as a people here to be able to help our youth, because they are the future. And really, it's been there since I've been an advocate for this kind of work and wanting to see change. So a little bit.
Thank you, Angela. You have a unique position too by working outside and within the system. I think that it's important to have people both within the systems, and talking about the governmental systems, and outside, those who are on the outside pushing for change, and those who are on the inside pulling other people along to ensure that those changes happen.
Absolutely.
So again, either one of you can jump into this. There are many, many, many legal issues that are facing our youth today. What are some of them, so that, the people who are watching can identify some of those issues that you see on a regular basis?
Well, Marie, Norma, I want to say at first that I'm no longer in the system. I retired 12 years ago. And that has given me the opportunity to what I call my healing. I was totally traumatized when I observed some of the situations that happened to our Black young men. And I work with male in custody. So I'm on the outside. I can look back to see what I collaborated with and built, and how some of it is falling apart. And we have changes with our Youth Justice Act. And some of those changes are not being implemented at all. So we really should be looking at what caused our children to get involved with the criminal justice system. That was your question, right? So first of all, I talk about the foundation of a family, because we talk about the African proverb, but we don't have that in Canada. Very few families share the same household or even the same street or neighborhood. But we need to look at the foundation of our family, and I want to talk about 4 aspects of the foundation of our family. Number 1 is safety for our children and educating them. Educating them around what are things that are safe and what is unsafe. Giving children, your children, their voice in a respectful way. We talk about having 1 mouth and 2 ears. As parents, really sit down and listen to the issues and concerns your children have. And it could be just walking with them, riding your bike with them, driving in the car with them. Not when they just come in from school, you say, sit down, we have to talk. They won't say 1 word. So that's number 1, is having respectful discussion with your children, educating them. And when you're not sure, please seek help. There is no shame to seeking help at all. The other thing is the health for your children. When your children go to see a physician or a clinic or something, some teenagers say, I don't want mom or dad to come in with me. So where possible, have a brief discussion with the practitioner before and after the discussion, because as parents, please ask the physician to ensure that a check is being made with your child for not only physical, but emotional health. I'm anxious, your son may say after school one day, and the odd person may say, oh, what are you anxious about? You're doing well. And just with the off-cuff response, he may not want to tell you at that time, but he will tell the doctor because the doctor will take the time to listen. So the health of your children is another thing. I've seen where parents say, you're so lazy, get up, go to school, get dressed. And the child is afraid to say, Mom, I feel so depressed because of the bullying that I am going through. I feel really down. And dad says, you get up, you go to school, you be a strong man. I never had to put up with that nonsense. So again, it goes right back to valuing what our children are saying. The other thing that seems to be happening in Canada, not amongst Black families only, but because minority and Blacks, when we come to this country, very highly educated, or if we're born here, we seek education. They do not have the highest paid and highest respectful jobs. So some of their children do not get the kind of financial help like going to university, going to college. So then you have families who divorce. Did you know that it is now called parental alienation and it is child abuse? Some parents don't know this. Maybe, Marie, you may want to speak to that. Parental alienation is when wife and husband, mother, father going through a divorce, and they're trying to get the child on either the mother's side or the father's side. So talking to your child, bad-mouthing mom or something, or discussing adult situation with your children, they feel hopeless because they don't know what to do. So when they go out and they may mention this with their friends say, tell the teacher, which is not the right way to go. It would be better to even tell a respected aunt or uncle or someone that you can trust that will go with you and talk to your parents and say, please don't put me in the middle of this. It makes my life terrible. And when that is not addressed, that young person goes outside of the family sphere to get that done and do not always get the proper advice. The other thing is school. School and the children's aid overlap like this. So here's a concrete lived example of a 16-year-old that came from the island when he was 15, living with his parents who had left him back in the island for his grandmother to take care of him. And she did a great job. Parents are so proud to have their child come and live in Canada. But when the child gets here, they don't see eye to eye. You get home from school at 4, we're not here, no TV, you do your homework, have a snack. What 16-year-old is gonna obey all those rules? So then the conflict starts in the family. It's upsetting for this 16-year-old who now goes to school and is not actively participating in school. So the teacher says, John, you don't seem to be here. You're not participating. And John said, my mom and I aren't getting along. And so the teacher sends John down to the principal, and the principal calls the children's aid because they perceive it is neglect, which they must follow the rule and call the children's aid. The children's aid can take that young person to an office or to a foster home before the parents are told. So
That's a serious problem.
Yeah, when the parents hear that my son, my Black son, who I'm so proud of, all those parents needed was someone to come beside them and say, let's look at what is happening. Hear John's side. Let's mediate the situation. John is now in the system. He's at the Children's Aid and he is very angry because he thought just sharing with the teacher would have said something he could do. Instead, he's now in the system and his parents have to talk to a social worker to try and get him out of the system, which they cannot just take him out the door. It's documented in the
And
system.
Norma, yeah, I'm gonna cut you there just for a second because we're gonna get into more of the overlap between the two. But I want to also say that, you know, while you are retired, many of the issues are exactly the same. I worked in the system, it's been 30 years. And the issues that were there then are still the same issues that we're dealing with today. All of those recommendations that were written in reports in the 1990s are still the same recommendations that are in reports that are written here. So, you know, it's still the same. Even though you're out, you are still in the system. The other issue I want to mention, you talk about spending time, parents spending time. Again, in this economic system, that is also difficult. And we'll get back to that because parents are now working 2-3 jobs again in order to just make ends meet. So they may be coming in the door when their children are going out to school and vice versa. So we will definitely get to that because I know you have a lot of insights where that is concerned. But I want to go to Angela because Nova Scotia is a little bit different. I mean, you do have families all living on the same street. You do have situations that you don't find in other provinces like Ontario or Saskatchewan, BC, etc. So what are some of the role that education plays and how do you maneuver that? How do you deal with all of that?
Well, thank you, Marie, and again, you said it so perfectly that it is different here. Yeah, we definitely have families, and you know, with over 15 historically African Nova Scotian communities, definitely families are surrounding one another. But as Norma talked about it, and you spoke about, there is a real reality that there is still very much an oppression here of Black and Brown people. That this Nova Scotia, you know, is a province that had enslaved people and not enslaved people. And so when you have this idea and the lack of generational wealth and limited opportunities, because, you know, we can talk about education, which we have, and we have the Black Report and we have like revisions of the Black Report here. But if, you know, we have systems in place such as the school system who is still not expecting the same standards from Black children and Brown children, then it's not going to change. I mean, we can have someone graduate grade 12, but if they're not graduating able to fill out an application, we've not done our job. So education, you know, Nelson Mandela, I love quotes, and he has said that it is the most powerful weapon you can have and use to change the world. And I do believe that that is true because it is something that can't be taken from youth. It can be taken from anybody. But I would say, you know, most importantly, how education then plays a factor in this is the limited opportunities and the fact that people, and I'd say, you know, Black people, when we think about criminal activity and socioeconomic status, we know are not being paid at the same level. We do not have access to the same jobs. And so those are the differences that will happen. And we then fall into the traps and prey of outside institutions and working to get money in different ways. And I think that is one of the largest problems that I see. And I think if we can do something to be able to help students and young people increase with their financial opportunities, then it will change the conversation. But if you're asking someone to go work a minimum job, you know, at $15 an hour, or and have a family, which we define family very differently. It could be grandmothers, nannies, aunties, uncles, all in the same home. And now you're asking them to be able to provide on a limited salary while we're also, let's just say, if we can say, fighting racism every day. And so you can't sometimes function. And I think Norma will speak about this later, about the intergenerational trauma. You know, if you're having people, young people who are hungry, who are fighting racism, who are feeling the burden and the harm of life and living in, I'll say Scotia because that's where I'm at, then we can't expect these children and young people to learn at the same ways in which people who are afforded privilege and generational wealth at the leisure every day. It is very different, and I think it's about time that our governments and all people acknowledge that. And once that's acknowledged, I think we can start moving the conversation even further forward.
Thank you. I know that we had some questions in the chat, and I'm going to go back and forth because I think it's important for people to at least continue be on when their questions are answered. So I'm just going to go to one of the questions in the chat before we move on to other questions that I may have for you. And Norma, you mentioned doctors will listen to our children, and the questioner asked, do doctors listen to our Black youth read their mental health without stereotyping, especially when it involves racism they're experiencing from teachers and peers in school? And I know that that is a serious issue. First of all, doctors listening to us, period. And second, getting our kids to now go to the doctor because they feel that doctors are not, you know, taking their issues seriously, and there have been so many misdiagnoses, et cetera. And having been a nurse for all those years, I'm sure that you have seen this. So can you answer the attendee's question?
Will the doctor answer the questions that that person has? And it's what happened here? It's one of the reasons. Can you hear me? Yeah. One of the reasons why we are fighting as a group to get more minority, more Black professionals in the system, because the same thing is happening in Mental Health Canada, where we are not getting Black folks, men, women, adults diagnosed properly. But one of the ways to overcome that, before you and your daughter heads out to see the doctor, say, let's write 3 items that you want to respond to. Because if you go to the doctor and they can't answer any of those 3 questions, or you are fumbling and saying, what was it we needed to ask again? The doctor has already moved to the next patient. So it's almost like getting a senior, a person that's over 65, to prepare for a doctor's visit. We should do the same thing with ourselves and our children. So Mary may not want to say exactly what she wants to talk to the doctor about. Get her to write 3 things. When you meet the doctor, say, Dr. Brown, I know you don't want me sitting in with Mary because she's 17, but she has 3 things she wants to ask you about. Could you please help her with these 3? If you don't prepare, and that's when you will know whether the doctor is not knowing you, not hearing you, not respecting you, if they can't even answer one of your questions because you are prepared with your questions. And that's the way I've seen it work. It's very similar to the teacher. When the mother gets upset because Mary said she was treated badly by the teacher, yes, she can value Mary by hearing what Mary said, but do not go in expecting any negative interactions with the teacher. Go in without this high emotion. Write down the questions you want answered and get somebody to write the response if you're not able to focus. So yes, we know that there are lots of professionals, physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, teachers who do not understand Black culture. And when you go in, they may even give the wrong diagnosis. You see people dying all the time because they're Black and a Caucasian gave them the wrong diagnosis. So that's why we should talk to each other and do not ever be ashamed.
Yeah. And building the trust too is also important.
Yes.
Angela, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I think that's such a valuable point and strategy to give to families. And also I'll say, just because it's my position too, I mean, people advocate and use your voice, when things aren't right. And I think sometimes, that people are going to label us and stereotype. They have biases, and it's about, I think it's on us to do what we can do. But I think there's an expectation that it's actually on the doctors, and it's on the practitioners and the clinicians to also be culturally competent, and to make sure that they're doing their due diligence, and you hold them to account to do it. And I think it's so, like Norma said, if we continue to talk to one another, there'll be not just one person in an office who's saying they've experienced this, there will be several. And so I appreciate that, those strategies too. So, yeah.
Thank you both. In 2020, the Manitoba Center for Health Policy did a report that documented the overlap between the child welfare and youth criminal justice system. So we know that there is a connection. And Norma, you started to talk about it in your initial remarks. How do some of the policies and practices that intersect between the justice system and the child welfare system increase the representation and involvement of Black youth who are incarcerated? Angela, we'll go to you first.
Sure. So for here, one of the things that I have noticed and talked to my colleagues about is the child welfare, which Norma, I'm more curious to hear what she's going to say after me. But is the intersect between the two, and that the fact that the two don't really have any communication with one another sometimes. I'm mindful that folks are doing double work sometimes, and in fast-pacing situations, and have to react. But one of the things that I do think that is problematic is when we have facility care units that are being run similar to juvenile detentions, and not understanding the significance of youth being in the criminal courts, or being there for their when they're called to be in the court for their sentencing, or when they have to enter a plea. And in some instances, the worker who, to no fault of their own, I'm not going to blame any one particular person. I think it's about our education and how people are being trained. But if a youth says they're too tired to get up, and they don't want to get up to attend their court appearance, and that's okay, then that's also a breach. And that becomes another charge. And so if we're not paying attention to how the breaches are being impacted by the youth, then we're not talking to one another. And so I think systems need to talk more. And also, I think, one of mentors of mine who I've learned so much about, and who does the IRCA reports for the impact of race and cultural assessments, Robert Wright, has often talked about, the fact that these youth who are in facilities and care units are being charged for things that you wouldn't be charged for at home. That, if you get in an argument with mom and dad, and, you throw something or you leave, you're not going to get police coming looking for you and become arrested. And so it's those things that people aren't really talking about, in terms of how can we make sure that this isn't happening. And when you have youth who are in, transient and don't have family supports, it's not about penalizing them, but how can we support? And like Norma talked about in the beginning, we think about love, and we think about surrounding with families, and how that is crucial to youth, and the fact that the ones helping them through their trauma, it shows up in criminal activity to no fault of their own.
Thank you, Angela. Norma, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I may just add, in terms of when our children, and I keep saying our because I'm Black and it's mostly Black children, it's the Children's Aid Society, but it's the child welfare system. That's what it truly is. So if you have a young person with the Children's Aid Society whose parents truly want to learn and want to get that person out the system, The system really oppresses that person. So a Black young man, he can't even get a proper comb to comb his hair in a foster home. Can't even get a little bit of Vaseline for his dry skin. He may be asking for something like, can I have some porridge for breakfast? And they always serve quick dry cereal. Then that young man, because he's an adolescent, he gets really angry. And if they say, you sit down, you behave, he may just throw a chair or a table. So the system pushes him either into another foster home where the behavior that has happened, the first one, is transferred as a report. So they're not looking for better behaviors. They're looking for worsening of that behavior for which he was. I've met young people who have been transferred 15 times in 1 year to different foster homes. And when they're in one of those foster homes, perhaps the foster parent says, I've had enough of this, so the police is called in. The police is not going to spend time to teach foster parents how to manage this young man. He or she, the officer, takes him to jail. He's now gone from the school to the foster home to the justice system, and that is where he gets stuck.
That's right. It is a serious pipeline. I want to go back a second to some of the stats. And Norma, you started talking about some stats with respect to our youth in the system. And I know that in one of the reports that I read in preparation for this, that they were saying in the last decade, the incarceration disparity between Black and white youth have remained high. This is 2021. Black youth were 4.7 times as likely to be placed, which meant detained or committed to juvenile facilities as their white peers. And this is now 2021, 2024. This goes back a decade to 2011. Things have really not changed. The numbers are almost like exactly the same. And according to another report that I read, there are approximately 25,000 youth, and that's as of the end of 2021, I believe, that are currently incarcerated. And those are only the ones that are incarcerated in youth detention centers. We're not counting the ones that are currently in adult detention centers and the conditions that they have to face in those adult detention centers. Can either one of you shed some more light on some of those numbers, or what you're seeing or what you have seen in your experiences?
Well, in 2008, the Youth Justice Criminal Act eliminated in Ontario for sure that children, adolescent, young people, they call them juveniles, should never be incarcerated with adults. So in Ontario, you will not find that they're together, except we have a new courthouse on University Avenue in Toronto, where there's a mixture of youth and adults. So see, that's where it's slipping, because they're waiting to go in the court. They can get to talk to adults, learn all kinds of stuff. But the numbers have gone down slightly in Ontario for Black youth being incarcerated because they are using more diversion, preventative methods to keep them out of jail. So the youth that are incarcerated, because I've been a nurse so long, I look at things through a healthcare lens. So if you should go to a youth custody facility today in Ontario, at least 50% of those young people have some form of mental illness. 50%, they're undiagnosed. So therefore, when the behaviors you see, when they get addicted, when they get in drugs, when they get in alcohol, they are using those substances to cover the mental illness behaviors, which gets them further down the left hand. So many of them, and they have looked at it, was 49 point something of Black children incarcerated in Ontario have been undiagnosed, or if they're diagnosed, they have the wrong diagnosis. So you'll find another 2 or 3%, they are illiterate. They cannot read or write because they've been kicked out, suspended out of school with their background of trauma. They wander around and they never learn to read and write, so they get in trouble with the law. You have another small percentage of children in juveniles that they cannot see. They've never had their eyes tested. And you think a 16-year-old or 17-year-old is going to say, hey, man, I can't see very well. He's just going to try to see what is there. So I'm pleading to parents when I say that. There are several children incarcerated that cannot hear. And they could even have lost their hearing during war, during the countries they're coming from. Their ears were never tested, so they don't even know that seeing their world, they're not hearing anything. And then you have young people with chronic diseases, asthma, TB, bronchitis, sickle cell disease. They are so frustrated with their life that if someone says, come, I'll give you a better life, then they take that. So that's some of the basic background of the children that are incarcerated. So what can we do?
I just want to also say that the stats that I just gave you are US-based stats, but they're very similar here in Canada. So in 2006, it was 5.3% of Black youth made up the general population, but 14.1% of admissions to pretrial detention. By 2015, Black youth made up 7.1% of the general population, but 15.3% of the admissions. Again, clearly, they are overrepresented in terms of admissions to any kind of detention center. Angela, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was just troubled by the numbers, to be quite honest. We keep having these conversations and they're, our kids are still being racially profiled. We can keep asking why there's so much overrepresentation. And I think it's important, but, the systems just are not changing for us to be successful and for our voices to be heard enough. And I loved, Marie, what you mentioned earlier about people working inside the systems and working outside. And it's so important. And really, it is fundamentally how we're going to shift things. And, to the points of the youth being incarcerated as opposed to adults, like I think what Norma's kind of been talking about and what I've heard so much of is even sometimes as an adult, when you're young, you are still a youth in your mind, psychologically. You have not really, so I think the courts need to start thinking about that as well when we talk about mental health and illiteracy and where we're at in terms of, 19 being sent to a jail. A population. So I thought of that when Norma was speaking. So sure you could speak more to it. But
yeah, and I mean, one might not think that it's related, but when we talk about universal health care and the need for universal health care, we all think that we have that here in Canada. We do not. We do not. Dental care wasn't covered until recently, and even then, it's only covered for some. We still don't have full universal pharmacare. It's only covered for a few things. We don't have universal vision care, dental care. We do not have universal health care. So it's another putting that out there to folks who are listening, that when we are casting our ballots, whether it is in a municipal election, a provincial election, federal election, those are some of the things we need to be talking about and looking for and listening for. And I'm gonna move on just a little bit because I know that there's some questions in the chat as well, but I want to go to some of the things that we see now that we didn't necessarily see 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that is part of, what brought the whole George Floyd issue into light, right? In large part because everyone is now on social media, some kind of social media of some kind. And they're being bombarded on a regular basis with all kinds of things that children did not see before. Parents would not allow them to watch particular programs on TV, all of those things. But now they have their own smartphone and they're able to see all of these things on the internet. And so those things that they're seeing, in my estimation, as having a very serious and lasting impact on what they're seeing and how they act and how they behave. I want to know how all of those things are now impacting our children's mental health and what supports are being offered. Angela, let me go to you first, and then I'll come to Norma, follow up with Norma with the question that's in the chat.
I mean, I think Norma would probably speak better to it in terms of the mental health capacity of it. I think, for the question about the youth and children feeling the impact so much, I do think it's on, as us as parents, and kind of back to that, that it takes a village to raise children. We need to kind of come back to that approach because, children are noticing this. I think of my grandson who's only in grade primary, and there's, him and another child who is Black in their class. And, he came home and said that he didn't want to go to the lunch program because there's only the two of us that go. Right. And so kids are noticing this about why are you only asking us to, without really verbalizing it, but he knows it. Like he already can sense there's a difference, even though we know how children are, only know love and only taught to hate, but there is a difference, I think. And so we, as, educators in the school system, I'll go back to the school system and how important I think that is. As teachers need to be aware and seeing things in the classroom, when you hear the N-word on the playground and you say to teachers, in the corner, or the people on duty say, I don't know how to deal with that. That's not okay, because it was being called, bullying is happening, the children are going home. And so if there's even, Zoom and opportunities of education like this, where we can have our parents come out and just talk to them about how to talk to your kids, and, in a safe space with like, how can we talk to our racialized and children about the impact of racism at a young age, and what can we do to survive that, or when you're pulled over, your rights. So I think it's important to kind of be holistic and think about how we can support each other as racialized parents, raising racialized children, and diversity of people. So but then, I can't speak to the strategies of mental health, because I think we all need to just get in therapy, and whatever therapy that is for you, whether it's, praying on your knees. I know my Lord and Savior saved me so many times, but, or it's a circle you have. I have no shame and no hidden spoken words about, I have a circle and, pray faithfully. And there's no higher power than that. So people need to make sure that they know what keeps them well, and have self-care.
I just want to acknowledge the attendee that talked about the world became desensitized to the violence towards Black bodies with George Floyd. 100% correct. 100%. And that's just, I know a number of people thought, a number of us, I'll include myself in there, that, okay, maybe we're turning a corner now. Maybe, we'll see something different. But it's almost as if they've doubled down on the things that are being done to us, and nobody seems to care that it's all there for everyone to see. Miss Norma, how do we deal with the mental health?
I think we just have to bite off little bits at a time, because it's not just social media. COVID changed a lot for young people. because during COVID, there were some children in Ontario that had no access to computer. Their parents could not afford it, though the schools say they would pick up the Rogers or the Bell costs for the cable. They had no access. They gave many of them secondhand computers that broke down. So many children were not learning very well, but yet they had iPhones and other devices that they spent hours on. And if you talk about addiction, some of these young people are actually addicted to those devices. And when there is an addiction, you don't just say, stop using, let me take your phone. There has to be some planning and some goal. And here's where we need collaboration with the school and the parents. Parents know their children, the school sees them so many hours for the day. What can they plan together? Because here in Ontario, the school is being asked to take the phones away from the young people when they come in the class in the mornings. Some young people would be very angry if it had not been discussed at home, to say that when you go to school, we're supporting the teacher to take the phone until recess. So there has to be some planning, because things will only get worse if our children are allowed to take their phones to their bedrooms. They're allowed to watch their phones and be on them at night when their parents are sleeping. They don't know what. So maybe starting with a few things at home. John, when you get home from school, let's see how we work this out together. I noticed that your grades are falling. What are some of the things that we can help you with? One of which may be the amount of time you spend on the phone, and get John's buy-in. Don't just say, put the phone away right after you get home. Then whatever else John has to do will never be done, because he's wondering who is texting me and who is calling me. So for our children mental health, I think it's valuing that they need help, have some discussion with them, plan goals of changing with them, and not just telling them, because they're the ones with the anxiety, they're the ones with the depression, they're the ones who don't sleep at night, they're the ones who don't eat well. And it goes right back to the relationship that parents and teachers have with these young people. But I think personally it's going to take a while, maybe longer than COVID was for the 2 years, to go back to using less phone, if we ever do. And if less is used, it has to be within a certain time during the day and the night.
It's similar to, what workers are asking for, the ability to disconnect, because, employers are expecting people to be on their phones 24/7, and when they text them to respond. And so just as workers are saying, no, we need that time to disconnect, I think that parents should be saying the same thing to their children. We need to be disconnecting, and everybody disconnect. It can't just be the children disconnecting from their phones. It has to be the parents as well. It's the examples that we need to set.
Yes.
So I want to go to a question in the chat, and this is for Angela, I believe. It has to do with the mental health mobile crisis unit in Nova Scotia. It's a partnership of the Nova Scotia Health Authority and the Halifax Regional Police and the IWK Health Centre. This person says in February, they called MHMCT with concerns regarding anti-Black racism and bias from the Halifax Regional Police. According to the Halifax Regional Police, the MHMCT had recommended that they press charges against this person for having called to report a crime which had caused them psychological harm, amongst other harms. I guess the question is, are you concerned around anti-Black racism within the mental health mobile crisis team? And then after you answer that, Angela, I want to ask Norma if she has any experience with the crisis team here in Ontario as well, working collaboratively with the police around some of our youth with mental health issues.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And I guess in full transparency, I can't speak to specifically the mobile health crisis unit, but to simple answer to your question, yes, very worried. I think, even listening to the question, like there's so many pieces in there where it's definitely was left on you to find out and prove that racism existed with no supports. And so I think, one of the things that mindful of, and I often say to people is, we should gone are the days that we have to try to prove this. We have several reports. Unfortunately, they may sit on a shelf, but there is reports out there that this exists and happens. And I'd say, honestly, we have here in Nova Scotia, we have the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute now, and who can help support this, this advocacy, so that it's taken off of your shoulders. And there's several community organizations that are doing this work too. And I would tell you that if it happens again, which I'm sure if you're here it will, to please reach out to the Justice Institute and see if there's a way that they can support you, because we know our human rights, and we also know the criminal code, and we know that there's breaches and there's charter infringements, and I think there's ways that we can navigate these systems as long as we have people working in them and also working outside. So definitely, short answer, worried about it. Will it happen again? Yes. I don't have the answer.
I would tend to agree with you too.
Mm-hmm.
Norma, I know that, we have the crisis units here in Ontario, particularly I can speak to the one in Toronto. And it's sad because when our children need that mental health support, oftentimes they have to be criminalized for it to happen. You have to form them, and, a whole set of police and others come and have to deal with it. Do you have any experience with it, or what are your thoughts on maybe how they work or how they could work better?
This is a wonderful idea to have and plan such a program, but I think it's going to take a while, maybe as long as we're fighting racism, because some of the police officers are not yet sure what the crisis folks are supposed to be doing. Because, for example, you call the crisis team where there's not a weapon and where somebody hasn't been badly injured. So by the time they sort that out, the crisis could have become more overwhelming. So I think they're working now on the policies in terms of when does the nurse go with the officer or a crisis worker, because they're training other professionals, but it's not, we can't measure it as yet. There's no measurement to say it has decreased the number of calls to the police by having the crisis team involved. There's no such measurement. I'll say very briefly, I worked for, when I retired, I did some work for the health teams in Ontario. And our goal at that time was to put registered psychiatric nurses in every school board. We did that as our team, because kids, as you say, Marie, they were dragged by the police into the hospital because there was no other choice. But the crisis team from the registered nurses, they visited those young people. They ensure that when they were through the school board, when they were going home, they had a re-entry plan. And what they were finding is that parents, because of work and other things, did not do the follow-up. So then the kids end up in crisis again. So I don't want to harp on parents, but I must say, no matter how hard the work is and the poverty of our work and the casual, try and get someone to fill a little gap that you're not able to, because when the gap is left open, our children fall right into it.
100%. 100%. I know that very, very well. I live in a community where everybody knew who I was. And so I had no issues pulling up other people's children. But I know that there were some parents in the community that had issues with other people pulling their children up. So we really have to take it to heart that it is a village, that it does take an entire village to raise our children. We know that none of us can do it on our own. And if you can do it on your own, you're superwoman or superman, you know? So I think that is really, really important. I want to go to some preventative strategies. So there've been many, many reports over the years and many recommendations, including the use of restorative justice, et cetera. What are your thoughts on this, and what are some preventative strategies that can be used by parents, communities, and the youth themselves? Angela, we'll go to you first.
I think I mean, we know that restorative justice, is in the courts now, and I think I'm a bit of a works for some, sometimes it doesn't work, and kind of sometimes it's revolving if we're not really putting the systems in place to support. But I do think it is good if we are accessing all of the systems together and working at it holistically, and the teaching continues, and the support continues, not just after the offense is done, and we kind of send the youth back off. And then also, I think, I'm a firm believer in youth knowing their rights. I think that, we talked a lot about parents and the caregivers, and, I think we can teach our children to ask questions with respect, that if you get pulled over, it is your right to ask a question. I think that it's important that we hold our youth and empower them to know their rights to be able to ask a question. I think the fear and the problem comes in when, the police aren't really equipped to deal with the fact that they're the young person who is racialized asking a question and knows their rights. And that goes also back to the teaching of within the police services, and how they view Black and Brown people in this province. And but preventative, I think, again, it's about youth knowing their rights and being able to, I'd say, when you have a lawyer, that in your disclosure, there's an opportunity to review your disclosure and review it. Take the time you need to review it. I think that there's sometimes stereotypes that come into play. Think about how did the police officer describe you? How were you described? Were there stereotypes that were in effect, stereotypes that were happening? And so we have policies here, the fair treatment policy for African Nova Scotians and African descent peoples. And we also, have recommendations from the Donald Marshall Inquiry. We have, now we have the IRCAs that are happening, and impact of race and cultural assessments, although that doesn't happen until the sentencing. So in terms of preventative, I think it opens up the opportunity to talk about someone's lived experience and the impact it had on them, and why they're here. So I think there is something to be said about those assessments and the use of them for people. So a couple of things.
Before I get to Norma, Collins, thank you for your stats too, because I think that they do make a difference. Collins has put up some stats in the chat. 15% of persons in Nova Scotia provincial jails are Black. That coincides with 15% of persons experiencing homelessness in Halifax are Black. So housing, poverty, educational experiences or lack thereof are all issues that I think contribute to our young people being incarcerated. If you have nowhere to live, you're gonna try and be able to, you have to get food somehow. If it's cold outside, you have to find somewhere to stay warm. And a lot of the times the police tend to pick you up and dash you in jail. I didn't say throw, I said dash, right? Dash you in jail. And then it becomes this whole system. In order to keep warm, you do things in the winter to go into jail so that you have somewhere warm to sleep. And it's not just Nova Scotia. This is happening right across this country. And you'll find that where there are communities that are impoverished, there is a higher percentage of incarceration. And, I've done a lot of things in my very short life. However, one of the things was working for the North York Board of Education before it was the Toronto District School Board. And they had a program, and again, program thanks to people who cared. Evelyn Steinberg, Madge Logan, Stephanie Payne. Stephanie Payne was the trustee, Madge Logan was the superintendent, Evelyn Steinberg was the principal. And they started a program called the Anti-Racism Leadership Program. It was already in secondary schools, but they started it in the elementary school because they recognized that kids needed that groundwork at that young age. And it was a program that worked with the kids, worked with the parents, and worked with the teachers. I don't think that there is a program like that anywhere across Canada now, but it's again, one of the things that I think will help, could help with our kids being out there, you know, on the loose with nothing to do and getting in trouble. So let me go to you, Norma, and ask you for it. What are some of the preventative strategies that you have used, that you have seen work, and that we should be using today to make sure that our kids stay out of that system?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind, and if I may be so privileged to do this, the last book I've written is called To End the Incarceration of Black and Minority Youth. So as I use the content of this book to do some education, there are many of us in my community, Black community, who is not aware of the Youth Justice Criminal Act, where it clearly states, if you put it in layman's terms, there are certain things that young people do that they're not to be incarcerated. So an example is if a young person using social media posts a naked person, a friend on Facebook so everyone could see it, though it is a criminal act, under the Youth Justice Act, it says that person must be offered diversion. You don't just lock up someone when that young person needs to be taught a skill. I see the media and I see some parts of society that says when a young person gets in trouble, we want to know the name, we want to know where they live, we want to know their age so we can keep an eye out for them. No, it says that they should not be identified because you want them to have a future. And when they're identified, it has to be for a specific reason, for a specific length of time. So if John has ran his car over someone, killed someone, he needs to be incarcerated for a while, but you still should not say his name unless you're looking for him Canada-wide. The other thing is there are so many diversion programs that we as parents need to talk to the agencies that are providing that. In Ontario, oh my goodness, there are so many agencies that are providing support for Black children. You look them up on Google, you talk to the Justice for Children, they have a department you can call. They send you a list of different web pages. Some parents are not sure what to do. So this kid is showing really bad behavior. They haven't thought of mental illness. They want some help. So what do? They call the police. No, before you do that, once your child is in the system, the name is there forever. So unless it's something really terrible happening, call the other services first. There are a lot of services here in the region of Peel where I live. There are so many of them, Roots Incorporated, so many services that help families and help children. So that's another preventative strategy. I talked already about the school, how to manage your child in school. Go and have a conversation, take a friend, go with questions. And for some of our young people, especially newcomers, They get involved with the police because the police does not understand their culture. So they're speaking to a young person who rolls his eyes and pouts his mouth and stand not facing the officer. They can be charged. So what I teach young people is forget the emotions for the time that you're doing that interaction. You could be as mad as hell, just don't show it. Speak intelligently. Officer, please tell me why I'm being stopped. Officer, please tell me that you're now going to take me away. I have one phone call and I would like to call my mom. The emotions have to be simmered down. The more emotional you get in these situations, they are looking at charging you for assault and all kinds of different things. And please, parents, look at what is offered for diversion for your children. Look at the help that is offered through some of the school boards. I volunteer in a diversion program. It's called the Associated Youth Services of Peel. And my role, because I've worked in the justice system, is for them to direct to me young people who have been on social media and getting themselves in trouble. AYSP develops the program. The case manager plans with this young person what are the skills they need, and I teach those skills and mentor them. So there's all kinds of supports for families, Black organization, youth justice organization. In Toronto, they have a Black person, a lawyer who is in charge of everything around DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity. So we need to look for the resources and don't wait till our children walk down beside an officer or beside a youth service officer in jail. Let's help each other. Call me, I'll tell you where to go and find the help you need. And I'm out there in the community because I just want to give back, because I want to see our children reach their potential. They are so smart.
They are. And you know, you listen to some of them, it gives you hope for the future. And that person you're talking about, the program Confronting Anti-Black Racism, Anthony Morgan, lawyer
Yes.
who is in charge, has been doing a fabulous job.
His
So
mom is
you
a
know,
nurse. His
yes.
mom is a retired nurse.
So it's actually great to have that program. And while they haven't been around very long, they are making a difference. And if we could get a program like that in every single major city, I think that we would be steps ahead of where we currently are. So you know, I want to just before we wrap up with the last question, just let our audience know that if you'd like to stick around after the conversation, we are inviting you to be part of the debrief. You won't be recorded, but you will get a chance to speak. And I know Norma is not able to stay much past 4:30, so I'm going to try and make this next question a little quick response so that we have some time at least with both our panelists at the end of this. So I guess the last question that I have for all of you is whether or not you have any suggestions to the various levels of government as to what needs to be done to ensure that our children and youth grow up to become productive members of society. And Angela, in your response, if you could talk about a little bit about some of the human rights issues and where people can go to deal with some of that. Norma, you talked about, you know, folks being able to go to visit their children's school, and I said sometimes they're not able to because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. Well, you know, family status is a human right, and if you are not being allowed by your employer to get that time to go and talk to your kid's school, then there are ways that we can deal with that as well. So any last words with respect to what can be done to make sure that our children do actually grow up to become productive members?
Human Rights Commission, is here and is available for folks, and now are building their capacity, and I'd say their race equity lens. They're building that, and then also the African Nova Scotian Justice Institute, which I think I've mentioned before, and who work closely with government. So I do think it is important that government, fund agencies to be able to support and collaborate with government to do the work, right? And I think not and fund them for longevity, not sustain for just because of the George Floyd, because we've heard of an incident, but be sustainable and really create an opportunity and create positions that youth can see us in. I think it's about making sure that government pays attention and does more than a checkbox service and shows up at events. And there's ways that government can be involved. It's not just about the political, but like behind. And we know the departments, executive directors. Like there's policies and legislation being written. We just wrote the legislation for dismantling hate and racism. So there's ways that we can effectively push government. As again, I'll go back to there's folks outside and folks inside. So I just think that people who are outside systems need to talk to people within the systems, and we need to kind of have those backdoor conversations so that we can see what issues we can move forward, and working together is just that. And just to the point, one thing I think, and I'm sure if we can, there's another platform we could talk about it. But even as adults, I think we get emotional, and when you've been checked by police a few times, it's really hard. So it's, we can make suggestions to youth, and even as adults, be able to act right and do the proper things. But the reality, we just can't. I know I speak for myself personally. I probably thought I should have been better at many moments when I wasn't. And we also need a space for youth and adults to be able to talk about how they acted and maybe what we can do better the next time. And then not use that as a reason that things stop. But we may not act right all the time or as our best selves, but that's actually not okay to continue the treatment. And so wrap that up there. Final thoughts, final words. Yeah.
The example that you want to see, which is, as you said, it's not always easy, but yeah, that's definitely the way to go. Norma?
I think it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults.
Yeah.
And if we as parents and society would really look at each child as being unique and made in a special image, we would really seek to help even one child. One mentor coming alongside a child, especially where parents have said, I need some help. We would see such a changed world. And we need to reach out and help each other. We need to not be ashamed that we're not well to help our children, or we're not educated to know everything, which no one does. And if you don't ask, you won't know.
Very true. Very, very true. I want to thank you both. I think that the phrase you just used, Norma, it's easier to build strong children than to fix broken adults. We all need to remember that in everything that we do, not just in the work that we do within the criminal justice system, but in everything that we do. So let me thank you both. This has been amazing. Amazing. I know I said I was going to stop at 4, but we could probably go on for another hour, but I know that Norma has to go, and we really want to get some of our attendees to ask some questions or just make some comments after this. So I want to thank the both of you for a very informative panel. I want to thank those who are our techies behind the scenes, who do this on a weekly basis, that make us on the screen look really good. And obviously, those who thought about having these fireside chats. I think they're great. I want to invite all of you to join us next week. The issue next week will be advocating within the immigration system, children and youth with precarious immigration, which includes migrants, refugees, international students. Where are they? Where are they? What are they doing? Children with precarious immigration status are those whose parents brought them to Canada as youngsters, and they did not know they had no status. Some are mentally ill, some are lost at school and unable to participate in school curricular activities, or parents don't know that these children can attend school. Others are homeless, don't know where to go and seek help. And we will have a number of speakers on there, including some from organizations as Cleo, a trustee who's aware of the Child Welfare Act, and a parent who received help for the child to become a landed immigrant. We know that as well, there are people who have been deported, who've been here since they were, under a year old, that did not know that their parents had not applied for status for them. So that conversation will happen next week. We'd like to thank you all, and we look forward to seeing you again on our Fireside Chat next week at 3 o'clock. Amazing. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 woman growing strong. 100 woman where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny.